Good afternoon, everybody. I'm making this video to show one strategy of attacking a mass tort problem. Suppose you have multiple parties and many torts flying all around in every direction. Sometimes it can be difficult to keep track of who's committing which torts and all of the torts that anybody could possibly bring. So one strategy that a professor recommended to us last year, was making a small chart or a big chart, depending on how many parties are involved, with an X and Y axis. And along each axis, you'll list each of the parties. In this hypothetical that I'm going to explain, I've got A, B, C, D, and E. And so I've listed A, B, C, D, and E on the y-axis and the x-axis. As you're reading the tort scenario, the fact pattern, instead of keeping a long list of all of the possible torts that anybody could bring, you might start filling in the torts that each person could bring against another inside this grid. For example, if A could bring a tort of false imprisonment against B, you would write it here. Sorry, I'm writing this upside down. False imprisonment. And you would also include any defenses that B could allege back at A here. In addition, if A could sue B for negligence, you would include that here. And any defenses that C could allege back at A. Possible intervening act that disrupted the chain of causation. Obviously, A cannot bring a tort against A, so there'll be some boxes that might not have anything in them. Maybe A has no claim against D or E, and that's perfectly okay to have some boxes blank. But when it gets confusing is when there's so many parties and so many different torts that each person could bring against another. For example, D could have a claim against B. D could have a claim against C. D could have a separate claim against E. C could have a claim against B. C could have a claim against D. And finally, E could have a claim against everybody. And each of these claims might be separate and individual from one another. And instead of keeping a long list of all of the possible claims that each person could bring against everybody else, this kind of graphically illustrates one way to organize your thoughts as you're reading the fact pattern. And in addition, this also helps you list everything organized and including the defenses here. Just helps you attack the problem differently than just making a long list. Now, this might not be a great method for everybody, but it might help in some circumstances where there's so many parties and so many torts just flying around everywhere. One could even assume a situation where there'll be 10 parties instead of just 5, or 3 parties, or 20 parties, and maybe a million different torts. This strategy can work for scenarios with few parties and with many parties, but I think it's best used when you have several different individuals and many different torts. So just wanted to illustrate that to you guys. I'm sorry the drawing is not perfect, but I hope you guys get the message. If you have any questions, please send me an email. I'd love to explain this further if you're confused still.